Hello and welcome back. This is video 12 of the Flow Certified Coach training series. This is tile 10, Politics and Stakeholder Management. And we have with us again today Andrew Henwood, and I'm really excited that he's here today. And he's going to introduce himself on the next slide.
Thanks, Andrew. So once again, I'm Andrew Henwood. I'm a part of the cohort of ZF coaches that are part of these training series. I have an opportunity to work with a bunch of great people in a department called Methods Incubation as a part of IT innovation, where we get a chance to teach, coach, and facilitate both mindsets, skill sets, and tool sets throughout the enterprise.
Very good.
So we're going to be talking now particularly about the concept of stakeholder management. This is something that for me, I love the amount of resonance that this topic has inside of me, because one of the things Andrew pointed to is the connection that stakeholder management has to politics. And politics, in some of the other video series that Andrew has referenced, is a blood sport. It's something that you have to be willing to take a blow and give a blow, because it has everything to do with power and immediacy. So with immediacy, we're going to be talking about effort. We're going to be talking about a couple other things, but it's basically inside of moments. How can you deal with the people who are in front of you? Can you deal with them directly or indirectly? Politics can be that sideways kind of a game with people who have an agreement in one instance and then want to try and start to break agreements in other instances. So we have to know as coaches, how do we keep track of these different people, keep track of perhaps their interests, keep track of what skin they have in the game, if any, and then how we might be able to mitigate with them. We're always doing this in the sense of trying to drive change and having enough people beside us or behind us to create what's called here that critical mass. Getting enough people moving in the same direction that the movement, I don't want to say is inevitable, but it's something that we can feel destined, because they start looking around and saying, okay, this works. I can see these people are behind it. Oh, okay, we can do that. So we do have to manage those multiple dimensions. There's going to be a couple different graphs that we'll look at that will take a look at juxtaposing interest and power, as well as power and effort. In both instances, we're talking about stakeholders here. We're talking about leaders. They're going to have varying degrees of power and authority. How much they're willing to expend that inside of a particular topic, we can look at that, but it's also slightly problematic, but also creates opportunities when we look at how much interest they have in the individual, in the project, the portfolio, whatever it is that we're looking into, how much interest they have, as well as how much effort they're willing to put in. Those are two very different things. Sometimes it's those 30,000-foot eagle eyes, and sometimes the expression like I like to use, they've got skin in the game. They're showing up and they're putting out their work as well. So those two different results can create two very different views of who's involved in a situation and how you should interact with them. Great. So here's the first one we're going to take a look at. This is the power interest matrix. So when we're looking at these individuals, we have to ask ourselves, in this world of politics, which exists when we have a lack of agreement, in this world of politics, are these people as power holders high? We can see that sticky note with the A, where, okay, this is a plus. This is somebody who's on our side. We don't have to expend lots of effort trying to convince them of anything. They're there. They might not have the highest interest in the world, but they're not a blocker. It's not something as a net minus or a zero that we have to try and contend with. So we'll take that one. As we look down, we have some more people with a little bit lower power, with a little bit lower of an interest, but they still retain that title of stakeholder. Could be a leader that we might need to bring to our side. So we have to ask ourselves what perhaps is motivating them. In a previous video, we talked about the 4 whys. So best understanding the needs of these people is what's going to allow us to focus on those minuses and those zeros without being succumbed by the zero. Again, those complete blockers that, let's be honest, they're probably not going to change, but also not going too deeply into those pluses because they're already in our camp. They're already in our side. So if we look around in these, we can see some of those opportunities in those high interest people that might not have a lot of power. We start building those up and we can start to feel, again, those energy shift moments take place. I've been a part of those calls before where I had a radical suggestion that we had a working group that had made next to no progress on a very pressing topic, months with very little progress. And after 1 or 2 meetings, I realized that we've got 30 leaders working on a task, and no one understood the problem was 30 leaders working on the task because there's
Exactly.
just simply too many people, and they were vying for these political angles, resting on their power as a reflection of their interest. And I quickly realized that the people who were there, I made them agree to something. And for them, it was a bit of a push, but I said, can we leave our job titles at the door? And
Ooh.
it's a bit ironic because we're working virtually. So they appreciated the joke because we weren't actually in the same room. But the point of it was that we had to say, we need to just focus on the work. So if we kind of removed that power axis even a little bit, we said, okay, who has the highest degree of interest here? Is this something that you're feeling really driven by? And immediately half of the people, the names on the list were able to say, this is something I got brought into. And I said, then you know what? Thank you for your opportunities to serve on this topic. We welcome you to reprioritize yourself to another topic. And suddenly we had 5 or 6 people. They were all really high interest people, varying degrees of power, but they were high interest people that found comfort working together, and they began to see through those titles of power and authority, and we had instant agreement, which we know is the antidote to politics, is agreement.
Yes.
So by reframing their need to say, okay, one, we have to get the power out the window. In the work that we're doing now, it's too important, it's too pressing, and our deadline is way too tight for us to try and play this game. Check it at the door. So that brought everything down a notch, and then we could focus on interest. So that was an interesting opportunity to look at how that matrix became a lever I could pull to get into a much higher state of performance for this working group.
And that's a really great example, by the way. And the other thing we should probably let people know is that these are just snapshots in time.
Yeah.
And as you go through time, the snapshot will change. And we'll come back to some of the other stuff later, but that was really good.
Thank you. It was fun. So here's the other matrix where we can again see power being mapped, but also it's going to be effort. So this is how much work they're willing to put into it. So it's not just the interest of, okay, I'm going to give you a lot of leash and a lot of leeway to make some decisions and try and make some progress on a topic. This is where we're seeing people willing to actually put it in. So it's either they're going to put in the effort or they're actively going to block it. So this is where we can really see the impact of this effort scale, where somebody could be very interested, but as we can see written on the slide here, still not support or put any effort into it, which again becomes that irony paradox of, okay, so we're interested in something, we're just not really willing to do anything about it. So we have to get those leaders into those positions to tap into their interest and transition it into effort. So even if those people, once again, we can see here with those low levels of power who are willing to put in the work, those are the ones that we can say that's our biggest opportunity. For me, though, that's my biggest target group there. The really high, powerful profile people, those A's and those H's who can put in that. That's, for me, that's good. But I like that bottom right quadrant. That's the one I like to tackle because I see that there's always going to be more. And if I'm trying to drive that critical mass topic, sometimes it is a name. Sometimes it's better to have 3 or 4 of those names. So it's all about where we want to focus in those efforts and energies while still acknowledging there's certain people that we're just not going to move.
Yep.
And in one of the previous videos, the other point that I wanted to reference is this as a tool is a wonderful internal tool. This is one of those things that we don't want to put up on the wall room when we're trying to identify, because as Andrew has pointed out very accurately, if we were to put names on these letters, those low effort, high power people, they probably wouldn't appreciate seeing that. So this isn't one of those external facing things. It's something, it's a great asset to have, Again, if you're working with a project manager, perhaps, or a product owner inside of an agile themed work, that if that's going to be the case, yes, it can be helpful to better understand the layout. Like you said, it is dependent upon time. People change. When we're talking about people, they change. Beliefs, not so much. But when the facts on the ground change, then the behavior starts to change. So keeping a constant pulse on who's involved, what are their motivators, what are their whys, what sort of effort are they willing to put in, what sort of interest do they have, and how can we pull on those strings as coaches to put the effort in the best position to be successful.
Yep. Exactly. I was just thinking about when we were working with one of the teams there. Uh, it was a stakeholder that later we found out that it wasn't by title, but by the very fact of how long they had been there and their expertise. They had a lot of power. May have
Yeah.
been the most powerful person sitting in the room during the training, and that person was a skeptic. I used to say, don't convert the heretics, you know.
Yeah.
And so anybody that was a minus, because that was the campaign, the political campaign management we were taught on if you were trying to get elected to something. This
Mm-hmm.
is a little bit different. And so if I get somebody, it's not so much that they're a heretic, they're a skeptic.
Yeah.
They're agnostic. But one of the she was I won't name names, but she was in the training. Very powerful person, turned out to be a key person for the whole effort. What was interesting is without even missing a beat, because I don't remember her name, but I just remember looking at her and just saying, I love skeptics. And she looked really shocked and like, what, why? Because she was used to being able to slice things up. I said, the
Mm-hmm.
reason I love skeptics is because when they see what we can do and what we can deliver, they become our best boosters.
Yep.
So they could almost be described as if you can flip a minus
Mm-hmm.
through training, because like you said, people don't want to change their minds, but they're willing to make a new decision based on new information.
Mm-hmm.
If you can give them that new information so that they can make a new decision, suddenly they can go from a minus to a double plus plus. and
Absolutely.
and it was just like, in hindsight, it showed me that, yeah, sometimes you can't convert the heretics, but the skeptics that you can flip will become often your very best boosters. So
Absolutely.
there's a lot in play here. And so what you shared just sort of triggered that thought from one of the teams we worked with there. So
And it's
uh,
a powerful moment, and I totally agree with you, by the way. If you
yeah.
can find that one person who you can, and I like the language of flip, to
Yeah.
be able to get them, because everyone's been used to hearing them. The
Yeah.
typically people who are in that position will be very vocal about it. And this is where we have to practice the skill of hearing and not just listening.
Yeah.
That we have to hear what the real root cause of those objections might be. And then suddenly we realize, I see the lever I need to pull. And then simply by hearing what they have to say and presenting them with that new angle that they might not have seen, they're seeing it as a two-dimensional square, and you show up and teach them it's actually a three-dimensional cube. Let's take a look over here. And then suddenly they say, oh, and then they hit that moment on that aha curve
Yeah.
where they're ready to launch. And it's something where I remember in a workshop that you and I were in, that there was a ZF colleague, and it was something where it was in the first sprint of a city build, and she was frustrated and she had her arms folded back. And I remember going over to her and she said, this is the most frustrating experience in my life. And I'm like, so you're failing? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, do you know why? She said, no. And I explained to her that she just simply wasn't communicating with her product owner. She was just trying to work. And she sat back and she went, this is the first time in training I've ever failed. She said, it's people always talk about failing fast, but I've never actually had to fail before. And I'm like, how does it feel? And she's like, horrible. And I'm like, do you want to do better? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, how about right now? She's like, yeah. I'm like, and that's why we do this. And she had this moment of, I get it. I get it. And now she's one of the loudest proponents of the sorts of changes that we're going for. And it took failure and an honest dialogue of
Yep.
why.
Yeah.
And then inside of that opportunity, now hope springs eternal.
Exactly. That's just a really good example. I love it.
Good. So let's do a quick recap. So we know that when we talk about managing stakeholders, we're always trying to figure out, as we're driving change, how is the drive going? Who is positioning themselves where in this political game of trying to mitigate those change in the absence of agreements? Because typically change is trudging through those moments where we're working on agreements, but they're not in place yet. So we know that we have to think about it politically. We understand it can be a bit of a blood sport. We have to know what sorts of levers to pull on those whys for those leaders to gain the necessary critical mass to allow for change to actually happen. There's the two different ways that we could map these individuals out. We're always looking to what sort of power they have in the position that they're in, but we're always looking at what's their degree of interest and what sort of effort. Are they investing in the effort? Are they actively blocking the necessary efforts? By having a clear view of who those people are and where they stand, we know where to invest our finite energy as coaches and deliverers of change. So these two maps can be very different. Understand that that's totally fine. So we could say here, interpersonal relationships and relational capital. For me, it's like I said before in the story, it's about hearing. When you're trying to create relationships with people, everybody's willing to talk. Few people are willing to listen, and even fewer people hear what someone else is communicating. So having that empathetic stance towards these people, not just talking at them and wagging a finger, but understanding that we need to hear them and their concerns, find those new angles to present information so that we don't challenge their beliefs. You can bring your beliefs
Mhm.
with you, but
Yep.
perhaps make a few new choices that open up the floodgates to further opportunities.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Andrew. This was
You're welcome.
really, really, really good. I appreciated your presentation and the examples. They were awesome, as usual.
Thank you.
And look forward to having you again in another video sometime soon.
Sounds good. Take care.
Thanks. Bye bye.